find a much deeper involvement by the United States than just helping keep that one dissident's identity quiet. The State Department actually gets involved. Now, remember, this is in 2008. This is under the Bush administration, his last days and the beginning days of the Obama push. In fact, Obama's new media team was featured at this summit. Of course they were. Of course they were. The State Department announced at this summit that they were going to partner with this group, the Alliance Youth Movement, and hold a summit in New York. Now, this is the same summit where the young Egyptian dissident attended. Under the Secretary of State for Public Diplomacy, this guy here, his name is James Glassman. Also, he was with this gentleman here. This is Jared Cohen from the Secretary's policy planning staff. They gave an on-the-record briefing to preview the coming event and why the State Department was getting in on this. Someone had introduced at this briefing what was described as exciting and innovative, a new program that is working with various partners in the private sector. Quote, "It is working with youth to help combat extremism and to use new trends in social networking, as well as the technical aspects of social networking, to help various groups come together to combat extremism." Now, I remember just not too long ago that anyone who pointed out that various groups were being cobbled together in an alliance in Egypt, well, I remember not too long ago that person immediately being called crazy and all kinds of names by the media elite. Names like conspiracy theorist, which is strange because that's exactly what the government, with Cass Sunstein in his own memo, said to call people that would point things out against the government, even though if those conspiracy theories turned out to be true. That's either a conspiracy theory, a wild coincidence, or true. You'll have to decide which it is. Our State Department explicitly explained how they actively engaged, funded, and supported various youth organizations. Undersecretary Glassman touted that he had gotten activist organizations, brought them together with, quote, private sector partners, including Facebook, Google, MTV, AT&T, Howcast, Access 360 Media, Columbia University, and so much more. He said, oh, wow, look at that one. That's a network over there. He said, the idea is to put all these people together, share best practices, produce a manual that will be accessible online and in print to any group that wants to build a youth empowerment organization to push back against violence and oppression around the world. Gosh, we saw a little pamphlet. I wonder if that was connected. I don't know yet. But we will. They have cobbled together as many groups as possible. One of the Alliance's youth movement's ambassador, the AYM ambassador, is this gentleman. Now, have we seen this gentleman before? Majid Nawaz. Well, here he is describing his background and his conversion at last year's conference. Here it is.
I've come from a Islamist background. I spent 13 years in the leadership of an Islamist organization which was anti-democracy and was an extremist organization. I spent time in prison in Egypt as a political prisoner for my affiliation to that group, and I helped establish that group in Pakistan. So after leaving the organization and deciding to work against extremism, I felt that it would be, I suppose, a good thing to go back to Pakistan and try and challenge and reverse some of the extremism that I helped sow in that country.
Praise Jesus. He is part of the Hizb ut-Tahrir Islamicist movement. Okay. Have we heard of this? Now remember, he was working for 13 years with this group, but then he went to jail and saw the light, and now he's working against them. Let me remind you who this group is. They called for violence against American troops in Afghanistan, saying American actions should be met with the sword, not words of condemnation. In 2007, they got busted for plotting to bomb military and civilian airports in Germany. They carried out attacks against Americans and Israeli embassies in Uzbekistan in 2004. And do you remember the website that we showed you at the top of this program, Khalifa.com? This one, remember this? Yeah. Isbat Tahrir to the Supreme Council of Egyptian Armed Forces. The second Camp David protector has fallen. Oh, it's great, isn't it? Khalifa.com. In 2009, it was Isbat Tahrir who was also responsible for this. Remember, Khalifa, Isbat Tahrir America presents. Where is it, baby? Bring it on. The Khalifa Conference. Caliphate Conference 2009, the fall of capitalism and the rise of Islam. This happened at the Hilton Hotel in Illinois. The conference was called The Fall of Capitalism, the Rise of Islam. They are the same people behind the website we showed you at the top of the hour. But hey, he's reformed, and that's good enough for the State Department. Is it good enough for you? This man was a bad dude, and he says he had a pivot point in prison. That's great. Maybe he has. I can't judge the man's heart. But I do go back to Van Jones, who says exactly the same thing. I had a pivot point. In fact, I believe his pivot point came in prison. Jail. Van Jones said, quote, I am willing to forego the cheap satisfaction of the radical pose for the deep satisfaction of the radical ends. Van Jones hasn't changed anything, but he's put on a suit and a tie, and now he can talk all pretty. Your life is at stake, America, our Western way of life. Do you know enough to say, oh, I'm totally comfortable. If the State Department says he's cool, I'm cool with him. Remember, the State Department has been so good on everything. The Director of Intelligence for our country has said this about the Muslim Brotherhood.
A very heterogeneous group, largely secular, which has eschewed violence and has decried al-Qaeda as a perversion of Islam.
Because remember, the Muslim Brotherhood has had a change of heart. They used to be that way, but they're not anymore. Now, one of the guys on the board of CPAC, a conservative, said this weekend about the Muslim Brotherhood.
Mr. Khan?
With what?
That we should be outreaching to the Muslim Brotherhood and
Well, the nation is no Muslim Brotherhood in the United States.
There's no Muslim Brotherhood in the United States?
No.
There's no Muslim Brotherhood. A board member of CPAC says that? He's a conservative. He was in with Bush. Isn't that weird? One topic of interest for the State Department was Egypt. Here's one series from the cables. Overcoming Adversity, a case study from Egypt. A discussion about Egypt's pro-democracy youth movements and the importance of the online space in Egypt to speak out in favor of democracy and human rights. The moderator was Matthew Waxman, Associate Professor of Law at Columbia Law School. Now, one questioner actually picked up and said, hey, what about the consequences about working against Egypt, who's an ally? I mean, we're sending them money and we're plotting their demise? This is how he responded when asked if interfering in Egypt, America ran the risk of unleashing something that might come back and bite us in the butt or bite us here at home. Quote, these governments may not appreciate your involvement in the inspiring or helping to create this network of people that could, or would be, in the case of Israel, a threat. Don't you run the risk of unleashing something here that is going to come back and bite you, especially with our allies? Glassman answered, quote, we're very supportive of the pro-democracy groups around the world, and sometimes that puts us at odds with certain governments. There's a difference on an operational level between what we do in public diplomacy, and what is often done in official diplomacy. We're communicating and engaging at the level of the public, not at the level of officials. In other words, we're nudging the people, and we're engaging in duplicity. So, you know, it certainly is possible that some of these governments will not be happy with that. But what we're doing, that's what we do in public diplomacy. There's one more thing that is really quite disturbing, and we're going to share that next.